The cry cut through the forest like a thin blade of sound, short, broken, and full of panic. It rose from somewhere ahead of the gorilla troop, echoing off the giant trunks and dripping vines of the Congo basin. Even the birds stopped mid-call. Even the cicadas paused. And for a heartbeat, the entire forest listened with them. Baku, the giant silverback, froze where he stood. His massive chest was still rising from his early morning climb, but now the breath caught inside him, tight and alert. Mala, his tiny daughter, clung to the fur at the center of his back, her little fingers gripping harder as she felt her father's muscles stiffen. Another cry followed, softer this time, like someone trying not to be heard. Then the jungle fell silent again. But that was the middle of the story. The moment the day cracked open, to understand it fully, you have to go back just a little. Earlier that morning, the forest had been peaceful. The sun had only just pierced the thick canopy, sending beams of warm gold across the mossy floor. A thin mist hung between the tree trunks, glowing like smoke. The gorilla troop moved through it in their slow, familiar rhythm, plucking leaves, snapping stems, grunting softly to one another. Juveniles chased each other around a fallen log, their play sending tiny clouds of dust into the air. The sound of their laughter, like hoots, drifted gently upward. Baku walked at the center of them all, steady as a boulder in a river. His silverback glimmered slightly under the morning light, his dark face calm and unreadable. Every few steps, Mala reached up to tug at his fur or pat her tiny hand against his arm, demanding reassurance. Baku would answer with a soft rumble so deep it trembled through his chest and into hers. She would press her cheek against him, satisfied. The troop was heading toward a fruiting grove, one of their favorites. The air already smelled sweet with overripe figs. Vines swayed overhead. A pair of hornbills flapped loudly from tree to tree, dropping bits of bark as they passed. Nothing was wrong. Nothing hinted at danger. Not yet. But as they neared the grove, Baku paused. He tilted his head slightly. His ears twitched. Something brushed against the edge of his awareness. A faint sound, barely more than breath. He frowned, looking into the trees ahead. Then it came again, a small, wavering cry. Not a bird. Not a monkey. Something else. The other gorillas heard it too. They slowed, huffing in confusion. Mothers gathered their infants closer. One young male beat his chest twice. Not a challenge, just a warning. Baku stepped forward, Mala clutching his fur. His nostrils flared, tasting the air. There it was, a thin line of scent, almost hidden beneath the damp smell of leaves and earth. A musky, wild smell. Feline. He scanned the ground. Deep scratch marks scored the trunk of a tree near the grove. A branch above was bent sharply downward, as if something heavy had leaped from it at high speed. Predator signs. But no predator. The cry came again, this time sounding almost like a whimper. It pulled at something deep inside Bakun. Old instinct, carved into generations of gorilla fathers who had seen danger, lived danger, survived danger. The troop behind him stirred uneasily. Still, Baku moved toward the sound. The forest narrowed around him. Vines brushed his shoulders. Leaves crunched under his hands. Mala lifted her head, wide-eyed, searching in the same direction as her father. The air felt thicker here, heavier with meaning. Then, in a small clearing just ahead, he saw it. A tiny ball of spotted fur trembling in the grass. A leopard cub so young, its eyes looked too big for its face. So small, it could have curled into Baku's palm. Its sides rose and fell in shallow, panicked breaths. It tried to stand but collapsed again, letting out a weak cry that barely reached the trees. Mala gasped a tiny, confused sound. Behind Baku, the troop erupted in sharp, anxious calls. Gorillas knew the scent of leopards well. Leopards were among their few true enemies. Even a fully grown silverback sometimes avoided a mother. Leopard on the hunt, Baku's eyes scanned the shadows around the clearing. Every branch, every rock, every pool of darkness under a leaf. He expected movement. Expected the low rumble of a leopard returning to defend its cub. But nothing came. Only the wind. Only silence. Only the helpless cub struggling to lift its head. Baku took a slow step closer, his massive form blotting out the sun. The cub blinked up at him, shaking from cold or fear or both. Its tiny mouth opened as if to cry again, but no sound escaped. It simply stared, unsure whether this giant creature was a threat or a miracle. The troop behind Baku panicked louder. Some urged him back with sharp barks. Others retreated into the shadows of large trees, pulling their children close. The forest itself seemed to lean in, waiting to see what the silverback would do. Mala, from her perch on her father's back, reached out a small hand. Her fingers stretched toward the trembling cub, brushing the air. She made a soft, questioning sound, the same sound she made whenever she found a new flower or a colorful beetle. For a brief second, Baku didn't breathe. Something shifted inside him. Something instinctual, ancient. The urge to protect, even when protection brought danger. The instinct that made leaders out of silverbacks. He stepped closer. The cub made no move to flee. It could hardly move at all. Its fur was damp with dew and fear. Its claws barely protruded from its tiny paws. Its sides quivered as if every breath cost more than the last. Baku lowered himself carefully, folding his giant body toward the forest floor. Mala clung tighter as he leaned forward, studying the cub with dark, steady eyes. He reached out one thick finger and nudged the ground beside it. Testing its reaction, the cub made a soft sound, not of fear, but of exhaustion. Behind Baku, the troop's calls softened into uneasy murmurs. No one understood this moment, not fully. Not even Baku, but the forest understood. It held its breath, vines hanging still, leaves refusing to flutter. The Congo basin knew when something rare was happening. The silverback reached forward again, this time closer. Gentler. The cub did not run. It simply pressed its head into the moss, trusting anything that wasn't the cold. Empty fear of being alone, and in that quiet, trembling moment, something in Baku decided. He turned slightly, shielding Mala and the cub at the same time, as if both were now under his protection. The forest exhaled around him. The morning light shifted, glinting off the silver hairs on his back. A single beam of sun slid through the canopy and fell across the cub, warming its spotted coat. For the first time, the tiny leopard stopped shaking. Baku watched it with a heavy, thoughtful stillness, the kind that marked the beginning of something larger, a choice that would change the rhythm of the forest, the safety of his troop, and the path of his own heart. Far in the distance, a low, almost invisible growl rolled through the trees. It was faint. It was far away. But it promised everything the morning had tried to hide. Baku did not move. The cub breathed quietly at his feet, and the jungle waited. The first drop of rain hit the ground. At the exact moment, the cub cried out again. Louder this time, sharper, piercing through the trees like a signal flare. Baku's head snapped up. Every gorilla around him froze. The forest had been tense before, but now it felt alive with danger, swelling like a storm cloud ready to burst. A low, distant growl rolled through the underbrush, faint but unmistakable. It wasn't close, but it was enough to make the troop erupt. A chorus of deep roars and warning barks exploded behind Baku. Mothers dragged their young away, scrambling up roots and over fallen logs. Juveniles bolted in chaotic bursts, unsure which direction meant safety. Even Mala, usually fearless in her father's shadow, pressed herself against Baku's leg, as if trying to disappear into him. That cry from the cub had changed everything. But to understand how quickly the balance shifted, you must rewind a tiny moment back to the instant right before the world cracked open. When Baku first leaned toward the cub, the forest had held its breath. The cub had stopped trembling for a heartbeat. Mala had reached out her hand, curious and innocent. For a brief, fragile moment, there was peace, strange peace. But peace all the same. Then came that louder cry. It was enough to destroy the calm. Gorilla voices tore through the trees, sharp and terrified. They weren't angry at the cub. They were scared, terrified of the one creature in these woods, brave enough or desperate enough to hunt a gorilla, a mother leopard defending her young. Baku felt Mala's fingers dig into his fur. He gently touched her arm in reassurance, but she stayed tense, her tiny breaths warm against his skin. The scent of leopard musk floated on the air, growing heavier with every second. It pressed against the troop like an invisible hand. The cub cried again, louder still. And that was when panic truly took hold. Gorillas screamed. Branches snapped as they scrambled back. A young male slammed his chest with frantic beats, each one echoing through the clearing like a warning drum. Another mother hissed at the cub, not out of cruelty, but out of terror, begging it to be silent. Silent. Before its mother heard, silent. Before something came running out of the shadows, silent. Before it was too late, but the cub couldn't stop. Its tiny body shook with hunger, fear, and loneliness. Every cry carried the same message. I'm lost. I'm weak. I need help. To Baku, those cries felt like hooks tugging at his heart. He looked down at the cub, then at Mala, then at the trees around them. Dark, silent, waiting. He could hear his troop calling to him, begging him to leave the cub behind, to walk away, to protect Mala and the others. But Mala took a small step forward. Just one. Her hand slipped away from Baku's leg, reaching toward the cub again. Her eyes were wide not with fear this time, but with something gentler, something purer, something that made Baku's breath catch. As she reached out, a sudden crack of thunder ripped across the sky. The clouds split open, and rain began falling in a fast, cold sheet. Mala flinched, stumbling slightly, and Baku moved instantly, his hand sweeping around her, steadying her tiny body. In that same heartbeat, he made his choice. Baku moved forward. He knelt, his enormous hands lowering toward the ground. Mala clung to his arm, watching closely. The cub's cries softened into small sobs as Baku's shadow fell over it. With slow, careful movements, he scooped the little leopard into his palms. The cub fit there easily, barely more than a handful of shaking fur and damp whiskers. Behind him, the troop roared in disbelief. Some backed away farther. Some slapped the ground nervously. A few stared at Baku with confusion, unable to understand why their leader, strongest of them, all chose compassion instead of safety. But Baku stayed still, letting the reins soak through his fur as the cub curled into his hands, desperate for warmth. Mala reached out and touched the cub's back with one tiny finger. The cub didn't hiss. It didn't try to claw. It only pressed closer, letting out a small sigh. Another growl rolled through the forest. This one was closer, much closer. Baku lifted his head and stared into the trees. The shadows seemed to pulse. A shape moved between two trunks, silent and deadly. It did not rush, did not leap. It simply watched. A mother leopard. Her eyes glowed faintly in the dim light, following the shape of her stolen cub. Raindrops slid down her whiskers. Her tail whipped once through the air. Every instinct in the forest screamed. Gorillas scrambled higher, pressing their backs to the bark. Some grabbed large branches as weapons. Mothers shielded their infants beneath their bodies, trembling with fear. Mala hid behind Baku's shoulder, but she didn't let go of him. The mother leopard stepped closer. Her paws made no sound, but her presence filled the clearing like a rising tide. She was soaked, starving, and filled with the single thought every mother knows: my baby. Baku rose slowly to his full height. He didn't roar, he didn't charge. He only stood towering, immovable, a wall of muscle and authority between his troop and the predator. Lightning flashed above them, turning the clearing white for a heartbeat. For that single moment, both parents glared across the space, one clutching the cub, the other fighting the wild urge to reclaim it. The rain grew heavier. Leaves sagged under the weight. Water dripped from Baku's chin, from the cub's fur, from Mala's tiny hand gripping her father's shoulder. The forest became a world of breath and heartbeat and fear. Baku leaned forward, holding the cub protectively against his chest. The mother leopard crouched low, ready to spring. It was a moment stretched thin enough to tear. Baku felt his troop behind him, felt Mala's trembling fingers, felt the cub's weak heartbeat against his palm. He knew the truth. If he ran, the leopard would chase. If he fought, someone would die. If he surrendered the cub, the forest would return to balance. But the cub might not survive the transfer. The clearing vibrated with tension. Baku exhaled slowly, deep rumble rolling from his chest. The cub whimpered. The mother leopard took one step forward. Thunder cracked again. And in that electric, breathless moment, the silverback held the tiny cub tighter and made the impossible choice that would change everything. The storm answered with a long roll of thunder, as if the sky itself felt the weight of his decision. The rain fell harder. The shadows around them shifted, and the jungle closed in, waiting for the moment when instinct and compassion would collide. Lightning split the sky again, tearing through the canopy and illuminating the clearing in jagged flashes. For a heartbeat, the world seemed frozen, the silverback, the trembling cub in his hands, and the leopard mother emerging from the shadows, all caught in a single frame of raw tension. Rain poured in sheets, pounding the leaves and mud around them, soaking everything, drenching even the strongest trunks of the Congo basin. Every drop carried the smell of wet earth and wild musk. Every beat of the forest's pulse seemed louder, faster, closer. Baku's massive chest rose and fell, slow and steady despite the pounding storm as he held the cub close. Him from the side, her tiny body trembling, her little hand pressed against his damp fur. She peeked around his arm, eyes wide, trying to make sense of the scene. Predator and protector locked in a silent, invisible conversation. The mother leopard's golden eyes glowed faintly in the gloom, ears flat against her skull, muscles coiled like springs. She was soaked, dripping, every hair heavy with water, yet alive with an urgency that only a parent could understand. The air hung heavy with expectation. The cub whimpered softly against Baku's palm, tiny claws pressing into his rough skin. Its small body shook from cold, fear, and exhaustion. It had no idea what was happening beyond instinct. The only thing it understood was the warmth radiating from Baku's hands. Then came a flash of understanding, almost imperceptible, yet undeniable. In that shared gaze, something passed between the silverback and the leopard. Both were parents. Both were guardians of helpless young. Both knew the terror of loss, the sharp, sudden grief of death snatched too soon. Of the jungle, the unspoken rules that demanded predator and prey remained forever enemies. They seemed to bend just enough around something older, something deeper, compassion. Baku's massive arms lowered slowly, deliberate and unhurried, toward the forest floor. He kept the cub secure, but his motion was gentle, careful not to startle it. The cub's legs twitched as if testing its tiny strength, and it let out a soft squeak of recognition, or perhaps relief. Behind the mother leopard, the shadows shifted. She crouched low, body tense, but did not move forward. Her tail twitched once, softly like a heartbeat. The storm roared around them, yet in the clearing itself, time slowed. And silence stretched between predator and primate. Mala, sensing her father's calm decision, inched closer. Touching the cub lightly with her tiny fingers, the cub responded, with a barely audible purr sound of comfort it had never known. It pressed its head against Mala's hand for a moment before Baku nudged it gently, encouraging it forward. The mother leopard stepped closer now, slow, cautious. Her golden eyes never left the cub. Her growl was low and barely audible, a sound not of attack, but of recognition. She sniffed the air, nostrils flaring, absorbing every drop of scent from the silverback, the cub, and the rain. Baku did not flinch. He did not roar, merely stood tall, sheltering both Mala and the cub beneath his presence. Then, in one careful motion, he lowered the cub onto the damp leaves. The tiny animal tumbled slightly, caught itself, and froze. Its eyes met those of its mother for the first time in weeks, familiar yet foreign, terrifying yet magnetic. The leopard stepped forward, sniffing, nudging with her nose, and finally allowed the cub to crawl toward her. She licked its soaked fur, growling softly in a sound that seemed almost grateful. Baku stepped back. massive arms dropping to his sides, chest still rising and falling in a controlled rhythm. The storm seemed to notice his decision. Rain softened, thunder moved away across the hills. Even the wind slowed, as though the jungle itself exhaled. The troop behind Baku remained frozen, unsure if it was safe to breathe, to move, to exist in this new balance. Slowly, mothers gathered their infants, glancing at Baku with new understanding. Some leaned into him for protection. Their trust deepened by the choice he had made. Mala's small face was wet with rain and awe. She reached out again, touching the cub lightly as it pressed against its mother. She whispered something small and soft, a word of comfort she thought no one could hear. The mother leopard, distracted for a heartbeat, allowed the touch. Almost as if acknowledging that kindness had crossed the boundaries of instinct, lightning illuminated the scene one last time, showing the mother licking her cub, the silverback. Watching intently, and Mala leaning into her father's side. Then the mother turned, slipping silently back into the underbrush. The cub pressed close to her body. She disappeared into the shadows, leaving only a whisper of movement, a flick of tail, and the scent of wet fur. Baku watched until the last glimmer of gold fur vanished, until the forest seemed whole again. Only then did he let himself breathe fully, a deep exhale that sent ripples through his chest and shoulders. Mala clung to him, pressing her cheek against his chest, feeling the slow rhythm of his heartbeat. She had witnessed something she would never forget, a lesson written in instinct and empathy, in strength tempered with compassion. The rain softened into a drizzle. Water dripped from the leaves like tiny strings of silver. The forest smelled of moss, wet earth, and the faint musk of predator and protector alike. Slowly, the troop began moving again, quieter now, more thoughtful. Juveniles followed their mothers, mimicking the careful steps of their elders. Now, the jungle itself seemed to change after that night. The trees taller, the light softer, the air heavier with wisdom. Baku settled onto a fallen log, Mala resting in his lap. He lifted a hand and stroked her small back, teaching her through touch the quiet power of courage, patience, and empathy. Outside the clearing, somewhere in the distance, the mother leopard and her cub moved silently through the undergrowth, invisible yet present. A living reminder that trust could bridge even the deepest divides. As dawn broke over the forest, the first warm light streaked through the canopy, scattering gold across wet leaves. Mist curled like smoke, and the jungle woke slowly, cautiously, as if remembering the night's lesson. Baku sat quietly, Mala's small hand gripping his fur, feeling the weight of everything they had witnessed. He knew, as the sun rose, that the world was cruel and wild, but also that kindness, even in a world ruled by tooth and claw, could echo longer than fear. The cub's soft cries were gone, replaced by the protective hum of its mother. Baku and Mala remained still, silent, sharing the moment with the forest. Around them, life resumed, birds called, leaves rustled. Water dripped from branches, but something intangible had changed. The jungle had held its breath, witnessed an act that would be remembered in its shadows. For Mala, for the troop, and even for the distant mother leopard, the world felt wider and wiser. Compassion had triumphed over fear. Strength had met understanding. And in that quiet morning, with sunlight brushing the wet forest floor, Baku taught a truth as old as the trees themselves. Sometimes the greatest power lies not in the force of your arms, but in the courage of your heart. The rain softened completely. The sun broke through the mist. And the forest, so alive, so untamed, so merciless, was now touched by the quiet miracle of a single choice.